You think you know what violation feels like. You don't. Not until you come home at 2 in the morning to find your apartment door splintered like kindling, your safe busted open, and your own dresser drawers dumped on the floor like someone vomited up your entire life. I stood in the doorway, keys still in hand, and smelled it first. That's the thing nobody tells you. A break-in has a smell. Sweat, adrenaline, the ozone tang of panic and greed. Someone else's breath in your space. The air feels wrong, charged, like it's holding its breath with you. It's the smell of trespass, like hot metal, or the ghost of a storm that didn't quite happen. My name is Dan. I'm 62, widowed, retired from 30 years as a maintenance supervisor at a private school. I live alone in a rent-controlled apartment in a neighborhood that used to be cheap and is now emerging. That's what the realtors call it. Emerging. Like it's a butterfly. But all I ever see are more coffee shops with exposed brick and fewer of the old families who used to wave at each other from their porches. The people who used to look out for one another have either died off or been priced out. The new ones don't make eye contact. They're all earbuds and yoga mats and leased Teslas. I don't drink much. I don't date. I fix things. I mind my business. That's supposed to count for something. It didn't. The hall light flickered above me as I stepped inside, like the building itself couldn't decide whether to let me see the damage or spare me. The carpet was torn near the door where the splinters had scattered. I'd replaced that door myself just 3 years ago, after the old one had swollen with humidity and wouldn't close right. I'd measured twice, cut once, sanded the edges smooth. I remember thinking then how solid it felt when it latched. I remember thinking how safe that sound was. Now the latch hung twisted, bent like aluminum foil. The frame had splintered clean through. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They didn't kick it, they pried it. Probably wedged a flat bar in at the lock, gave it a few sharp hits, quick, quiet, the kind of work you do when you've done it before. I walked through slowly, cataloging. The TV was still there, the laptop. Too obvious, too traceable. Whoever did this wasn't stupid. They went for the hidden stuff, the safe behind the furnace access panel in the hallway closet. That's where I kept my late wife's jewelry, the pieces her grandmother brought over from the old country. Small, old-fashioned things, a locket with a tiny painted face inside, a gold wedding band too delicate for modern taste, a pair of earrings shaped like leaves. I'd never had them appraised, but I knew they were worth something. Not just in money, in memory. There was emergency cash, too. About $4,000. The savings I didn't like to keep in the bank. Birth certificates. The deed to a burial plot I'd already paid off. You think of these things as permanent, but when you see the space where they used to be, all that permanence evaporates. It's like seeing your own bones laid out on the floor. All gone. I knelt by the closet and touched the bent metal of the safe door. They'd used a pry bar, maybe a small sledge, knew exactly where to hit. The furnace panel was back in place, almost. Someone tried to be neat. That's what got me. They'd put things back. They'd thought about it. That meant time. Confidence. Not just some junkie smashing and grabbing. Someone who knew they had a few minutes. Someone who knew I wouldn't be home. That's when I noticed the real detail. The detail that made my stomach go cold. My spare key was gone from the magnetic hide-a-box under the mailroom stairs. I checked it on my way back up. Empty. And the only people who knew about that key were family. I sat on my couch in the dark until sunrise, not calling the cops, just thinking, adding, subtracting. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and I could hear the old radiator ticking faintly like a heartbeat. The room still smelled like them, whoever they were. I thought about fingerprints, about DNA, about calling the police right then. But I didn't move. You get to a certain age, and you start to measure action against outcome. You ask yourself, what will this fix? What will it change? I knew what the cops would do. They'd come in, take a report, make a few noises about checking local pawn shops. They'd tell me to call my insurance. They'd write down the serial number on the safe, if I still had it. They wouldn't find the jewelry. They wouldn't find the cash. They wouldn't find whoever did this. At 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. Group text from my daughter Megan. "Huge news! We closed on our new place!" 3 photos. Megan and her fiancé Tyler grinning in front of a 2-story modern house with one of those stupid farmhouse chic porches. Another photo of Tyler leaning against a brand new luxury SUV, black and chrome, dealer plates still on. I stared at that SUV for a long time, and that's when I started doing the math. I raised Megan alone after her mother died. She was 13 then, awkward, angry, all elbows and silence. We got through it the way you get through anything, slowly, painfully, one small act of forgiveness at a time. I packed her lunches, drove her to school, showed up to her band concerts, even though she hated that I clapped too loudly. She grew up quiet, cautious, smart, not cruel, but distant. Then she met Tyler. He was one of those men who smiled too much and too easily, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room, until you realized he smiled at everyone that way. Real estate guy, always on his phone. Talked a lot about leveraging opportunities. I'd met enough salesmen in my life to know what kind he was. Megan fell for it anyway. I didn't hate him, I just didn't trust him. The first time they visited, he called my apartment quaint. Said it with a grin, but his eyes darted over the furniture like he was scanning price tags. I offered him a beer. He asked if I had an IPA. I didn't. He settled for water. When he used the bathroom, I caught him glancing toward the hallway closet. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I wish I had. After they left that day, Megan texted me, "Please don't interrogate Tyler next time. He just gets nervous." I hadn't said much at all, but I knew what that meant. She'd already chosen her side. I spent that morning after the break-in cleaning. It gave me something to do. I swept up the splinters, vacuumed the carpet, straightened the drawers. Every movement felt mechanical, like tightening bolts on a machine that would never work again. The whole time, I kept circling back to one question: who knew about the safe? Megan did. I'd shown her once, back when her mother's will was finalized. Told her where I kept the papers, the jewelry, the emergency money. "In case something happens to me," I said. She was 17 then. She'd rolled her eyes but nodded. She was the only one who knew. The idea made me sick. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But I also couldn't ignore the coincidence. Tyler and Megan just bought a house, cash down payment, new SUV. No way a real estate junior associate and a part-time yoga instructor had that kind of money. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and stared at my phone. I typed out a text. "Congratulations. Proud of you." Then I deleted it. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and left. The sun was high by the time I reached their new neighborhood. It was one of those freshly built developments with names like Willow Ridge or Silver Oaks, even though there were no willows and no oaks. Just rows of identical houses, all beige and perfect, like teeth in a too-wide smile. I parked across from their driveway. The SUV gleamed in the sunlight, reflecting blue sky and white clouds. Dealer plates still. I felt the kind of anger that isn't loud but heavy, like carrying a sack of wet cement in your chest. Through the window, I saw movement. Tyler, shirtless, barefoot, making coffee in a kitchen twice the size of my living room. Megan walked in, wearing one of his shirts. She looked happy, peaceful. I sat there for a while, watching, hating myself for watching. I wasn't sure what I wanted, to catch them slipping, to see a shred of guilt, but they just looked normal, domestic, ordinary. Finally, I drove away. The cops came that afternoon, after I finally forced myself to make the call. 2 of them, young and polite. They took notes, asked questions, dusted a few surfaces. One of them, the taller one, said, "You got any enemies, sir?" I almost laughed. Enemies. What a ridiculous word. I fixed boilers and replaced light bulbs for a living. The only people who ever got mad at me were teachers when the air conditioning broke during exams. "No," I said. "No enemies. Family? Friends? Anyone who might have known where you kept your valuables?" I hesitated. Then I said, "Maybe." He nodded, wrote something down. "We'll file a report. You'll get a case number. But I'll be honest, sir. These kinds of things are hard to track unless something turns up at a pawn shop. You said jewelry, right? I'll make a note." After they left, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the slip of paper with the case number. From that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the safe door bent open, the metal warped like it had been screaming. I kept smelling that mix of sweat and fear. I kept thinking about the way the furnace panel had been replaced. How careful that was, like someone trying to make it look untouched. At around 2 a.m, the exact hour I'd come home the night before, I got up, turned on the light, and opened the closet again. I knelt there, tracing the dent marks on the safe door with my fingers. They'd known where to strike. 3 hits on the latch corner. That's not random. That's someone who knew where the hinge pins were, where the metal was weakest. Someone who'd seen the safe before, and the only person who'd ever seen that safe was my daughter. The next day, I went to the bank. I opened a new account, closed the old one, changed the locks on the door, bought a camera for the hallway. I moved slower than I used to, but my hands still knew what they were doing. Fixing things. That's muscle memory. That evening, Megan called. "Hey, Dad, I saw the missed call earlier. Everything okay?" Her voice was bright, distracted. In the background, I could hear Tyler laughing, music playing, maybe a blender running. I swallowed hard. Someone broke into my place. "Oh my God, are you serious? That's awful." She paused. "Did they take a lot?" "They knew where the safe was," I said. Silence. Just a beat too long. Then, "Oh, wow, that's awful, Dad." "Yeah," I said. "It is." She cleared her throat. "Listen, we're about to have people over, but I'll call you tomorrow, okay? Maybe you can come see the new place. It's really nice. We'd love to show you." I said yes, because that's what fathers do. But all night I kept hearing that pause, the little flicker of silence where surprise should have been. When I finally saw the house up close, it looked even bigger. Tyler greeted me at the door with a grin and a handshake that lingered too long. "Dan, great to see you, man. You gotta check out the kitchen. We went all out." I walked through, polite, smiling where I was supposed to. I saw the marble counters, the smart fridge, the new furniture. Every surface gleamed. It smelled like money and cleaning products. Then, on the hallway shelf, I saw it. A small framed photo. My late wife, holding Megan as a baby. The same photo that used to sit on my dresser. They hadn't just taken the safe. They'd taken pieces of my life. That's when I knew. And as Tyler laughed and poured me a drink, I started doing a different kind of math, the kind that doesn't stop at numbers. Before we continue, we ask you to subscribe and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. 2 days later, I drove to their place for brunch. Megan had texted me 12 times between the robbery and the invitation. Chirpy, insistent. "Come see the house, Dad. You'll love it. Bring champagne." Each message came with more exclamation points, more emojis, more brightness than any real person could sustain, like she was trying to smother something beneath all that cheer. I didn't respond to most of them. I stared at them on my cracked phone screen, one after another, watching her words pile up like flowers at a grave. I brought champagne. I also brought my eyes. The drive there was quiet. No music. Just the hum of the old Honda engine and the sound of my own thoughts chewing themselves to pieces. The city slid by in stages, the old streets with graffiti and shuttered storefronts giving way to new developments with pastel facades and decorative fountains. Everything shiny and hollow, the kind of neighborhoods where people pay extra to pretend they're safe. I'd fixed enough pipes and boilers in those kinds of houses to know what was underneath. Cheap materials, corners cut, paint slapped on thick enough to cover the cracks. When I turned onto their street, I slowed down. Every house looked like the same dream printed on different paper. Perfect lawns, trimmed bushes, wide driveways. And there, near the end of the cul-de-sac, stood Megan's new kingdom. 2 stories of white siding and black trim, windows big enough to show off their furniture to the world. The SUV sat in the driveway, gleaming like a beetle in the sun. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, hands on the wheel. My reflection looked back at me in the windshield. Lined face, gray stubble, eyes that had seen too much to be impressed anymore. I thought about turning around, driving home, pretending I'd been sick. But curiosity is a stubborn disease. Tyler opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd been waiting for his audience. "Dan, you made it," he said, flashing that salesman's smile. He wore a pale blue button-down that looked expensive, sleeves rolled up just enough to show off the muscle he probably paid a trainer for. "Come on in, man, let me give you the tour." The house was ridiculous. Open concept, granite counters, one of those kitchen islands big enough to land a plane on. There was a chandelier hanging above the dining table, bulbs shaped like candles. The place smelled faintly of lemon polish and whatever candle scent was fashionable that month, maybe clean linen or mountain air. All of it carefully staged, like they were living inside a catalog instead of a home. Tyler moved through the rooms with a kind of ownership that was more performance than comfort. He kept pointing things out. "That's a smart thermostat. Learns our schedule automatically. Surround sounds built into the ceiling. Oh, and check this out. Heated floors in the master bath. Total game changer." He grinned, waiting for my approval like a dog expecting a treat. "Got a hell of a deal," Tyler said finally, resting his hand on the counter like he'd built it himself. "Market's crazy, but we jumped on it. Megan's got a good eye." "It's beautiful," I said, and I made sure my voice didn't shake. Megan floated around us, phone always in her hand, filming everything for her Instagram story. My daughter's 32, pretty in that high-maintenance way that costs more than most people make in a month. Always angling herself toward the light, smiling without her eyes. She wore white, of course she did, and every few seconds she'd stop to adjust her hair before turning the camera on herself. She calls herself a brand consultant. Far as I can tell, that means she gets free makeup and overpriced clothes from companies in exchange for posting filtered pictures. She'd once told me she was building partnerships, and when I asked what that meant, she said, "It's complicated, Dad." It wasn't. It was pretending for a living. "We deserve this," Megan said now, looping her arm through Tyler's and squeezing. "After everything we've been through." I didn't ask what they'd been through. I just nodded. We sat down for brunch. Avocado toast, eggs poached just right, coffee that probably cost $30 a pound. Tyler talked about his job in pharmaceutical sales, regional manager now, projected for expansion. He dropped words like territory growth and client synergy. Megan chimed in with little hums of admiration, like she was a supporting actress in his commercial. I smiled and said the right things, but my mind wasn't in the room. It was still back in my apartment, in the dark, staring at the open safe and the empty velvet boxes. I could feel that same hollow space in my chest opening again. When Tyler suggested showing me the SUV, I followed him out to the garage. He hit a button, and the door rolled up with a smooth electric hum. The SUV gleamed under the light, polished to perfection. He started talking about torque and lane assist, something about adaptive cruise control and a lease deal that was basically free money. I wasn't listening. My eyes were on his wrist, the watch. Silver, square face, leather band cracked near the buckle. I knew that watch. I'd wound it every Sunday for years, even after it stopped keeping perfect time. It had belonged to my father, who wore it to work at the steel mill until the day he died. I kept it in the safe because the clasp was broken and I couldn't bring myself to fix it or throw it away. It was one of those things you hold on to because it still smells like someone you loved. Tyler saw me looking. His smile didn't falter, but I saw the flicker, the half-second of calculation behind his eyes. "Oh, this?" he said lightly, tapping the face. "Vintage find. Got it at an estate sale. Thought it looked sharp." "Nice," I said. The air in that garage felt heavy. It smelled like gasoline and polish and something faintly sour like old sweat. Behind him, half hidden by a stack of moving boxes, I noticed a few cardboard ones labeled in Megan's handwriting, the same loopy script I'd seen on birthday cards for decades. One box caught my eye. Office, Dad Docs. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger yet, colder, more like recognition. "Hey, Dad, get in the photo," Megan called from the doorway. She had her phone up, her smile bright and hollow. "Family pic for the gram." I smiled back and stood next to Tyler's stupid SUV. The flash went off. She posted it an hour later with the caption, "So proud of us, family first." I saw it pop up on my phone while I sat in their living room waiting for coffee. The comments were already rolling in. Heart emojis, people saying goals, inspiration, beautiful family. I scrolled through them with my thumb until my hand started to shake. Later, I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs. Megan pointed down the hall. "Second door on the left." I went into their bedroom instead, first door on the right. The air in there was different, warmer, heavier. The blinds were half closed, and light filtered through in soft gold stripes. The bed was perfectly made, pillows arranged with decorator precision, the kind of order that screams performance. The closet was a walk-in, bigger than my kitchen. Megan's clothes hung in color-coordinated rows, whites, creams, pastels, then darker shades, all on identical hangers. Tyler's side was smaller, but just as neat. Suits, gym clothes, shoes lined up like soldiers waiting for inspection. And on the center shelf, in a Tiffany blue box, I found it. My wife's necklace, gold chain, emerald pendant, the stone dark as forest glass. Sarah wore it the day we got married, her hair pinned up, her neck flushed with the heat of August. I could still see the way it caught the light when she laughed. I'd kept it in the safe, wrapped in tissue paper, because it was the one thing I couldn't bear to see every day. Now it was here, nestled in white silk, like a prize. The kind of staging you do when you want to make something look new, when you want to hide its history. I imagined Tyler giving it to Megan with a smirk, saying something like, "You deserve something special." Maybe she'd gasped, pressed a hand to her mouth, kissed him, believing, or pretending to believe, it came from him. A gift, a symbol, a lie. I stood there holding it, feeling my pulse in my teeth. My reflection in the closet mirror looked like a stranger, eyes red, jaw tight, mouth thin. I thought of Sarah, of the night she died, me sitting beside her hospital bed holding that same hand that once wore the ring they'd stolen. I thought of the years afterward, of Megan crying into my shirt, of me telling her we'd be okay, that we'd always take care of each other. I'd meant it. That was the moment I stopped being Dad. Something inside me went very still, like the last click of a lock turning shut. The air felt sharp. I put the necklace back exactly where I'd found it, straightened the silk, closed the lid. Then I took one long look around that room. The vanity mirror, the perfume bottles, the pair of champagne flutes on the nightstand. Everything glowed with that curated happiness people spend their lives chasing. But beneath it, I could feel the rot. When I walked downstairs, Megan was laughing at something on her phone, Tyler refilling mimosas. They looked up at me with matching smiles, like a pair of well-trained actors waiting for their cue. "Everything okay, Dad?" she asked. "Everything's fine," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost gentle. I picked up my coat from the chair, thanked them for brunch, promised to call soon. Tyler clapped me on the shoulder on my way out, his watch, glinting under the light. I drove home slow, hands steady on the wheel. The champagne sat unopened on the passenger seat. The city rolled past in reverse, the shiny new houses fading back into cracked sidewalks and leaning telephone poles, graffiti and old brick, and people who didn't pretend to be better than they were. By the time I reached my building, the sun was going down. I sat in the car for a long time, watching the shadows stretch across the street. In the distance, a siren wailed. Somewhere, someone was breaking something open. I thought about calling the police again, telling them what I'd seen. The watch, the necklace, the boxes. But I didn't. Some things don't belong to the system anymore. Some things you have to fix yourself. Inside my apartment, the air still smelled faintly of dust and intrusion. I went to the closet, ran my hand along the dented edge of the safe door. I could still feel the warmth from where their hands had pried it open. Then I sat down on the couch, in the same spot I'd sat that first night, and I began to make a list. Not on paper, in my head. The names, the places, the debts. Because when something breaks, you can't always repair it. Sometimes the only thing you can do is take it apart piece by piece until you understand how it failed. And then, if you're patient, if you've spent a lifetime fixing what others destroy, you can learn how to make it stop breaking altogether. That night, I didn't sleep. I just listened to the hum of the city outside, the tick of the radiator, the steady rhythm of something new forming inside me. Not anger, not grief. Something older, quieter, sharper. Resolve. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that waits. A week later was my son Evan's rehearsal dinner. Evan's 28, works in IT, soft around the edges in every way, physically, emotionally, even in how he talks. His voice always sounds like he's apologizing for taking up space. He's marrying a woman named Kelsey, who does something in non-profit fundraising, which, from what I can tell, means she spends other people's money while calling it noble. She talks like she's running for office, all hand gestures and practiced empathy, smiling like she's waiting for a camera flash that never comes. The dinner was at some Italian place with candles and too much wine. The kind of place where the napkins are cloth, but the waiters still call you boss. Long tables, red sauce, the smell of garlic and money trying to sound humble. The kind of restaurant my wife, Sarah, would have loved. She liked anything that pretended to be fancy but still served bread baskets. I thought of her sitting across from me, laughing, scolding Evan for drinking too much Coke when he was 10, telling Megan to put down her phone back when phones still had buttons. That's what a family was then. Now, sitting between my daughter and my son, I felt like a hostage. Everyone around me was smiling too hard, laughing too loud, clinking glasses for things that didn't deserve it. Tyler sat on Megan's other side, his hand on her thigh like he owned her. Evan looked nervous, pale, his tie slightly crooked. Kelsey sparkled like a chandelier, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. The waiter poured more wine. I let him. Maybe if I drank enough, the noise would blur. Kelsey stood up to give a toast. She had that look people get when they've practiced what they're about to say in the mirror, the way her shoulders squared, the way her smile froze at the edges. She tapped her glass with her fork. "Everyone," she said, voice clear and chirpy. "I just wanted to say a few words before dessert." The table quieted. Even the restaurant seemed to hush around her, the low hum of other diners fading into a polite background murmur. "Evan and I are so grateful for family," she began, doing that slow sweep of the room politicians do when they want to seem genuine. "We wouldn't be here without the love and support of everyone at this table." She smiled at me, like I was supposed to feel honored to be mentioned. And we're especially grateful to Dan. Heads turned. I blinked. Because pretty soon, she continued, we'll be taking care of his cute little apartment while he transitions into something more manageable. I stared at her. She smiled wider, waiting for the applause line that didn't come. I looked at Evan. He wasn't meeting my eyes. He was staring at his plate like it was an instruction manual. Generational housing, Kelsey went on, voice sweet but sharp underneath. That's what they call it. Right now it's kind of wasted on a single older man, but Evan and I see the potential. We'll fix it up. Make it a real home. People laughed. I didn't laugh. My fork hovered over my plate, my hand suddenly steady. I looked down at the lasagna I hadn't touched and imagined pressing the fork through the middle of it, slow and deliberate, until the plate cracked. Kelsey raised her glass. To family, she said. To family, everyone echoed, relief bleeding into their voices. I lifted my glass, touched it to my lips, and didn't drink. After dessert, I went outside for air. The night was cold, the kind of cold that sneaks into your joints and makes everything ache. I leaned against the brick wall near the parking lot and lit a cigarette, though I hadn't smoked in years. The first drag burned, but it felt real. Inside, through the restaurant's big window, I could see them laughing again, like nothing had happened. Evan's hand rested on Kelsey's shoulder. Megan was showing Tyler something on her phone, all of them comfortable, well-fed, oblivious. The door clicked open behind me. Dad, Megan said, voice low, careful. I heard her heels before I saw her, that quick, sharp sound like punctuation marks on concrete. She stepped closer, her breath clouding in the air. Don't be weird about the apartment thing. Kelsey didn't mean it like that. I exhaled smoke. How did she mean it? She sighed, the way people sigh when they've decided you're being unreasonable. You know how she is, always talking. It was just a joke. Didn't sound like a joke. Dad. She rubbed her forehead, annoyed. You can't take everything so literally. Look, you'll be fine. Tyler said you've still got backup money somewhere. That word, Tyler, hit like a nail through wood. I turned to her. How would Tyler know that? She blinked. What? Tyler. How would he know about my backup money? I don't know, Dad. She gave a little laugh that didn't sound like laughter. People talk. You probably mentioned it. I didn't. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, crossing her arms. Well, Evan probably told him. Told him what? I don't know. She was starting to sound defensive now. That you're, prepared, that you have savings. Where? I asked quietly. What? Where are my savings, Megan? She frowned. I don't know. Jesus, why are you being paranoid? I didn't answer. I just watched her. Really watched her. The way she couldn't meet my eyes. The way her hand kept twitching toward her phone like it was a shield. She pulled it out finally, scrolling through it without purpose, pretending to check something. Evan said you keep stuff in the safe behind the furnace panel, she said absently. He mentioned it years ago. Said you were smart like that. My stomach turned to stone. The furnace panel. I'd never told Megan about the furnace panel. Not once, not even in passing. Only Evan. And I told him during his college years, when he still lived at home, when I was teaching him how to fix things, how to think ahead, how to keep things safe. We'd been working in the hall closet, changing the filter on the furnace. I'd shown him the panel, the little magnetic box behind it, and told him, you never know when you'll need a backup plan. Always have something tucked away. He'd nodded, eyes bright, proud of the secret, like it made him an adult. I remember feeling that old fatherly swell of trust. My son remembered. My son told his fiancé. Maybe his fiancé told her friend. Maybe her friend told my daughter's fiancé. Or maybe they all knew. I turned and looked back through the window. The table glowed in the yellow light, warm and blurred through the glass. Evan, Kelsey, Tyler, and Megan, laughing, pouring more wine, passing plates like nothing in the world could touch them. They looked like an ad for happiness, but all I could see were teeth, a little family tree of snakes. I didn't go back inside. I finished the cigarette, crushed it beneath my shoe, and walked to my car. The cold bit through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My head was full of noise, voices overlapping, words like backup money, safe, wasted on a single older man. It all fit together too neatly. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, hands gripping the wheel. I could hear the muffled music from inside, the faint clatter of dishes. It sounded distant, like it was happening in another life. I thought about Evan at 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside me while I fixed his broken toy truck. He'd watched every move, eyes wide, like I was performing magic. "You just have to find the loose piece," I'd told him. "Everything breaks at the weakest point." Now I wondered when I'd become the weakest point. The car windows fogged with my breath. I sat there until the restaurant started to empty, until the waiters began stacking chairs. When Evan finally came out, laughing with Kelsey, he didn't see me parked in the shadows. I watched them walk to their car, her arm looped through his, her head resting against his shoulder like she already owned him. He opened the door for her. She laughed at something he said. The sound carried across the lot, soft and sweet and poisonous. When their car pulled away, I started mine. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. Back home, the apartment felt smaller than it ever had. The new lock I'd installed after the break-in clicked solidly behind me, but it didn't make me feel safe. The walls seemed closer, the air thicker. I turned on a lamp, just one, and sat at the kitchen table. I took out a notepad, the same kind I used to use for work orders, and began writing names: Megan, Tyler, Evan, Kelsey. I looked at the list for a long time. 4 names, 4 connections, 4 directions the same secret could have traveled. I drew lines between them, arrows, little notes in the margins. Told Tyler? Shared info? Motivation? Money? When I was still working maintenance, troubleshooting was my job. Find the leak, find the short, find the fracture. I'd done it for boilers and generators and old pipes that burst in the winter. This wasn't different. The system had failed. I just needed to see where. I got up, went to the closet, and opened the furnace panel again. The dented safe sat there, empty and useless. I ran my fingers along the warped metal, tracing the marks where the pry bar had bitten in. 3 strikes in the same place. Clean, efficient, not random, not frantic. Someone had known exactly how to open it. Evan had known how to open it. I'd taught him. The air seemed to leave the room all at once. I sat down on the floor and stayed there until my knees hurt, the hum of the furnace filling the silence. When I finally stood, I felt lighter, not calm, but focused. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, drank it slow. My reflection in the window looked old and unfamiliar. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was deduction. If Evan had told Kelsey, and Kelsey had talked to Megan, and Megan had confided in Tyler, then the chain was complete. The break-in wasn't random. It was domestic, organized, coordinated, even if they didn't think of it that way. They hadn't just stolen money or jewelry. They'd stolen trust, the one thing I'd spent my life building. I stared at the list again, at those names written in block letters. I thought about the way Kelsey had smiled while announcing my eviction from my own home, the way Megan had brushed off my questions, the way Tyler had worn my father's watch like it belonged to him, and Evan, my son, who couldn't even look at me across a dinner table. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought new tools. Not for fixing, for planning. Because the thing about fixing something broken is you have to understand it first. Every piece, every flaw, every weakness. Only then can you decide whether to repair it or dismantle it completely. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars honked, dogs barked, people hurried to work. The world kept spinning. But for me, something had stopped. A week ago, I'd been a man who thought he'd lost his valuables. Now I knew I'd lost something much more valuable than that, and I intended to find out exactly how and how far I was willing to go to get it back. The wedding was big. Too big, really, for my taste, but it was their day, and I was there. The hall was rented, vast and echoing, draped in white fabric that hung like clouds from the ceiling. Chandeliers glinted overhead, casting fractured light across the rows of tables set with crisp linens. A DJ sat off to one side, looking far too young and nervous, fingers twitching over his equipment like he expected it to explode. Off to the far wall, one of those dessert bars stretched out like a miniature bakery. 12 kinds of cupcakes lined in perfect rows, colors coordinated with the wedding palette, sprinkles and fondant flowers in shades that seemed slightly unreal. There was also a chocolate fountain, which someone had strategically positioned near the children's table, ensuring at least a minor disaster during the early courses. I sat at a table near the back, away from the head table, the stage, the central action. I drank water mostly, though the glass steamed in my hand from the warmth of the hall, and I could feel my pulse in the joints of my fingers. I waited. For what? I wasn't sure. Some small chance that the room would correct itself, that something would intervene before the performance of this new family dynamic became permanent. The ceremony was fine. Evan cried, not dramatically, but enough that it was noticeable, enough to make Kelsey glance at him and place her hand lightly on his arm. She looked beautiful in a way that demanded attention, and she knew it. The fabric of her gown shimmered in the light, strategically cut to flatter, to impress, to be remembered in photographs. Megan stood next to her as maid of honor, perfectly poised, holding a bouquet she probably didn't want to hold, wearing my wife's necklace. I noticed it immediately. 3 different people leaned over to compliment it, each touch and word sharpening the ache in my chest. They didn't know what they were praising. At the reception, after a flurry of introductions and polite greetings, Kelsey grabbed the microphone during the toasts. She had rehearsed this moment. It radiated from her posture, the tilt of her chin, the crisp confidence in her grip. "I just want to thank everyone," she said, voice bright, loud, professional. "Especially my new father-in-law, Dan." She paused, letting the title hang in the air, collecting attention like a net. "Because pretty soon Evan and I are going to be moving into his adorable apartment so we can save up for a real house." Laughter rippled through the room. Some polite clapping followed. The sound felt hollow to me, a rhythm that didn't belong to the truth. "It's going to be perfect," Kelsey continued, her voice rising slightly in the hall. "Cozy, affordable, and Dan's already agreed to move into something smaller, right, Dad?" Every head turned toward me. Phones were out, recording, sending. Eyes flicked from me to Kelsey, to Evan, to Megan, to the silverware and back again. Time slowed. I didn't move. My lips didn't twitch. My hands stayed flat on the table. The air pressed down, warm and thick with the scent of food, perfume, and polished shoes. Kelsey walked over, grinning, microphone still in hand. She stopped at my table and held out her other hand, palm up, as though offering me a gift. "Come on, Dad. Give us the keys. Let's make it official." The room was watching. Phones out, cameras recording, faces frozen mid-toast, a collective anticipation hanging over the crowd like a storm about to break. I looked at her hand, looked at her face, looked at Evan standing frozen by the head table, a pale, unsteady statue of indecision. "No," I said. Kelsey's smile faltered for a moment, the perfect curve of her lips dipping slightly, the practiced brightness dimming. "Dad, don't be difficult. We've talked about this." "We haven't," I said, slow and deliberate. Evan said, "Evan doesn't own my apartment." Her face hardened. the color draining from the warm pinks of blush to a taut, angry red. The smile was gone. She leaned down slightly, closer, microphone still hot in her grip, the metal cooling only in contrast to the heat radiating off her. "Give me the keys." "No," I repeated, my voice quieter now, deliberate, quiet as a blade sliding from its sheath. She slapped me. Not hard, just enough. Just enough to make a sound that echoed in the hall, just enough to make the air catch in everyone's lungs, just enough for the room to gasp, to still, to understand that what was happening had crossed a line. My cheek burned, not with pain, but with awareness, with a clarity that sharpened everything around me. I didn't touch it. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, very still, and looked at her, the way you look at a storm that's forming inside a familiar sky. Kelsey stepped back, breathing hard, her face red, the microphone hanging limp in her hand. The audience didn't breathe for a moment. Their faces were a mixture of confusion, fear, and fascination. They were waiting to see if the line would be crossed again. Evan didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there like a scarecrow, stiff and lifeless, the tie around his neck slightly askew. The gentle, soft-spoken man I had raised seemed to have evaporated into someone incapable of acting, paralyzed by spectacle and fear. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. My fingers were steady, even as my heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. I dialed one number, held it to my ear. 10 seconds later, the hall doors opened. Mac walked in. He's 57, 6'2", 240 pounds of old-school carpenter and part-time bar security. Broad shoulders, arms thick as tree trunks, hands the kind that could crush steel if needed, though they've always been used for building, repairing, creating. We worked together for 15 years in jobs that demanded precision and strength. He still wears his steel-toed boots to weddings, and the floorboards seemed to recognize that as he stepped in, heavy and deliberate. The room went completely silent. Conversations froze mid-word. The DJ's fingers hovered over his mixer, unsure whether to continue, unsure whether anything could continue. People recognized him. A few of the older guests actually teared up, because when Mac shows up to something, it means business. It's not a metaphor. It's literal. He doesn't bring subtlety. He brings presence, authority, the kind of presence that bends the air and stills the room without a single word. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, echoing slightly off the hall walls. He stopped next to my chair, didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge anyone else, just stood there, steady, immovable. I stood up, looked at Kelsey. Her eyes widened, the microphone dangling uselessly from her fingers. I could see the calculation flicker across her face, the sudden awareness that she was now dealing with someone outside the performance she thought she controlled. "You wanted keys?" I said, my voice low, calm, deliberate. "I brought you a locksmith." The room remained frozen. Some guests whispered to each other, not knowing if they should intervene or hide. Phones were still recording, the flashlights blinking faintly in anticipation. Kelsey's lips parted, hesitation washing over the confidence she had carried like armor moments before. She looked at Evan. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stood there, helpless, like a man watching a fire consume the house he thought he built. Mac didn't move, didn't blink. His presence alone was a statement, a weight that shifted the balance of the room, a gravitational pull that made it impossible to act rashly. I watched Kelsey's fingers tighten around the microphone. Her jaw worked once, twice, then she dropped the mic to the table with a clatter that rang like a bell through the stunned silence. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, to scream, to assert control, but the words died. There was no room left for them. I took a slow breath, letting the weight of the room's silence settle over me. I looked at my son, at my daughter, at the people who thought this was a celebration. Then I looked at Mac again. The night had shifted. Everything that had been performance, pretense, and assumed authority had collapsed. There were no jokes left, no polite laughter, only the unspoken message that boundaries had been drawn, lines had been enforced, and the man who had attempted to take what wasn't his would have to reconsider his assumptions. I sat back down slowly, letting my presence anchor the space. Mac stayed at my side, a sentinel, and the room's attention contracted around the tension we carried between us. No one moved. No one breathed louder than necessary. I sipped water from my glass, eyes never leaving Kelsey. And in that moment, the wedding, the cupcakes, the music, the lights, they all seemed to exist in a parallel dimension, irrelevant to the gravity of what had just occurred. Because sometimes, presence alone is enough to shift the world. And Mac, standing beside me, made sure she and everyone else understood that lesson. I didn't speak again. I just waited, calm, deliberate, letting the room absorb the weight of what had arrived. The wedding, the day of performance, the display of power, had all been eclipsed by the simple, undeniable truth. Boundaries are only as strong as the people willing to enforce them. And I had brought the strongest one I knew. Mac didn't touch anybody. Didn't have to. He just stood next to me, hands loose at his sides, and said in that low gravel voice he uses to clear out bars at closing time, "No one approaches this man without his permission." That was enough. The room split. Some people started whispering, others grabbed their phones. Kelsey's family started yelling, trying to reframe it, trying to make Mac the aggressor. But everyone had seen her slap me. Everyone had filmed it. I turned to Evan. He was still standing at the head table, pale, useless. "Evan," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. "Say it out loud. Whose idea was it to go into my place?" He opened his mouth, closed it. "Evan." "Dad, it wasn't—" "Say it." "Tyler said you wouldn't care." The room erupted. People talking over each other, gasping, pointing. Megan grabbed Tyler's arm, pulling him toward the exit. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I stayed calm, centered, cold. "Here's how this works," I said, voice cutting through the noise. "None of you are getting a key to my apartment. None of you are moving in. And as of right now, you're all evicted from my life." Kelsey started screaming. Something about lawyers, about abuse, about how I was ruining everything. I didn't listen. I just walked out with Mac, slow and steady, while people filmed us leaving. The story wasn't their wedding anymore. It was the father who said no. We drove in my truck. Old Ford, 200,000 miles, but the engine still purred. Mac sat shotgun, quiet, waiting. I drove us to a diner outside of town. Middle of nowhere, open 24 hours, serves breakfast all day. We sat in a corner booth. "You gonna tell me what's really happening?" Mac said. I laid it out. All of it. The robbery, the watch, the necklace, the boxes in the garage labeled with my name, the way Megan knew about the furnace panel, the way Kelsey tried to take my home in front of 100 witnesses. Mac listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. "You want cops?" "Not yet." "You want paperwork?" "Only if I need leverage." He nodded slow. "What do you want?" I looked out the window at the empty parking lot, the dark road beyond. "I want them radioactive," I said. "I want nobody touching them. Not socially, not financially, not career-wise. I want them to sit in silence and hear what silence really sounds like." Mac was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled, just a little. "Okay," he said. "Then we start with Tyler." Tyler worked from home most days. Megan's schedule was all over the place. Client meetings and coffee dates and long drives to boutique pop-ups. We picked a Wednesday afternoon. Mac and I, dressed in work vests, carried clipboards and tool bags, looked like inspectors, walked right up to their front door. I'd pulled the smart lock code off Megan's phone 2 weeks earlier. She'd posted a video on her Instagram story, showing off the convenience of keyless entry, and the camera caught the reflection of her fingers on the screen in the oven door glass behind her. 4 digits. I watched it frame by frame. The lock beeped green. We walked in. Tyler was in the kitchen, laptop open, conference call on mute. He looked up, confused, then scared. "What the hell?" "Sit down," I said. Mac moved to the counter, set his tool bag down with a heavy thunk. Didn't say anything. Didn't have to. Tyler sat. I pulled a folder from my bag, printed screenshots, Craigslist posts, Facebook Marketplace listings, community resale groups, my tools, my collectibles, my wife's jewelry box, empty, photographed and listed as vintage storage, all posted under Tyler's accounts. Different names, different photos, but the metadata didn't lie. I had a buddy who used to do IT security. He pulled the digital fingerprints for free. I laid the pages on the counter in front of Tyler. "You've been selling my stuff," I said, "trying to cover debts." Tyler's face went gray. "I didn't. You owe money to a contractor named Jim Halley. 12 grand for renovations you couldn't pay for. You owe another 8 to a guy who fronted you furniture for staging this place. The SUV? That's not a lease. That's a loan from Megan's ex-boyfriend who works at a dealership. And you're 3 months behind." Tyler was shaking. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to write a statement. Handwritten. Not about crimes. Just about how Megan pressured you into these purchases for her image. How Evan promised you access to my apartment to make it worth your while. How this whole thing was a family plan." "I can't." "You can. Or I take these screenshots to the cops and you explain to them why you're fencing stolen property." Tyler stared at the pages. His hands were trembling. "I need a pen," he whispered. I handed him one. He started writing. Slow, shaky letters. Max stood behind him, just watching, one boot tapping the tile. Halfway through, Tyler stopped, looked up. "What if I just leave? Right now?" Mac shifted his weight, moved his chair 6 inches, blocking the kitchen exit. Tyler looked at the door, looked at Mac, sat back down. "That sound you hear?" I said. "That's your backbone softening." He kept writing. "I changed my locks that night. Took me 4 hours. Mac helped. When we finished, I stood back and looked at it. My door, my space. Secure." "Feel better?" Mac asked. "Getting there." I'd already moved the important stuff. Photos, documents, my wife's wedding ring. Took it all to an old storage locker in the boiler room at my old job. Nobody used it anymore except Gloria, the current head of maintenance. She gave me a key, no questions asked. Gloria showed up the next morning with 2 thermoses of coffee and a bag of donuts. "You look like hell," she said. "Thanks." "Your daughter's a piece of work." "Yeah." Gloria's 60, built like a bulldog, swears like a sailor, and doesn't take crap from anyone. We worked together for 20 years. She knows my kids. She's never liked Megan. "You know she's been telling people she works at the school, right?" Gloria said. I looked up. "What?" "Calls herself Director of Community Outreach. Been using it on her social media, dropping it at networking events. I told the head of school. He's pissed. Says if she doesn't stop, he's sending a cease and desist." I smiled. "Good," I said. "That's good." Gloria gave me a long look. "You planning something?" "Maybe." "Need help?" "Maybe." She grinned. "Call me when you're ready. I owe that girl a kick in the ass." Megan had a lunch meeting on Friday, posted about it all week. "Networking with some amazing women in the community. Can't wait to share my vision." The restaurant was trendy, overpriced, full of white furniture and succulents. Megan sat at a table with 2 well-off women I recognized from her Instagram. Wives of donors, small business owners, the kind of people Megan wanted to impress. Gloria and I walked in at noon. Megan saw us and went stiff. Gloria walked right up to the table, big smile, work boots loud on the tile. "Megan, hey, just wanted to clear something up." She turned to the 2 women. "Hi, I'm Gloria. I run maintenance at the private school where Megan's dad used to work. Megan's been telling people she's our director of community outreach, but that's not true. We don't have that position. And our head of school said if she keeps using our name, we're sending a legal letter. The two women stared. Megan's face went bone white. That's not, Megan started. Also, I said, stepping up beside Gloria. That necklace you're wearing, it belonged to my late wife. Went missing when my apartment got robbed a few weeks ago. Funny how it ended up around your neck. One of the women gasped. The other pulled out her phone. Megan stood up fast, knocking her chair back. This is insane. He's confused. Ask your fiancé's brother Evan about the safe behind the furnace panel, I said, looking at the women. He'll confirm it. The two women exchanged glances. One of them put cash on the table. They both stood, mumbled apologies, and left. Megan stood there, shaking, staring at me. The restaurant was silent. Gloria winked at me. We walked out together. Outside, in the parking lot, Megan caught up to us. She was crying, makeup running, phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. You're ruining my life, she hissed. I stopped, turned. No, honey, I said. I'm live streaming it. I got in my truck and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched her standing there, alone, shaking. Evan and Kelsey's first week of marriage was chaos. They were still in their old rental, a cramped one-bedroom near the university. They'd planned to sublet it and move into my place, use the rent difference to pad their savings. Now they were stuck paying full freight. I knew because I parked across the street one night and listened. Their bedroom window was open. July heat. No AC. Your dad humiliated me at our wedding, Kelsey said. Her voice carried clear. I know. In front of everyone. People are still texting me about it, asking if I'm okay, asking if your family is insane. I'm sorry. Are you seriously sorry, or are you just saying that? Silence. Evan, answer me. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to explain why you robbed your own father because Tyler said he wouldn't care. More silence. You're pathetic, Kelsey said. I recorded the whole thing on my phone, audio only, but clear. Kelsey saying, you robbed your own father. That was ammo. I saved it. I met with Jim Halley at a bar 2 towns over. Jim's the contractor Tyler owed money to. 50 years old. Hands like catcher's mitts. The kind of guy who builds houses and doesn't take excuses. You're Dan, Jim said when I sat down. That's me. Your son-in-law's a piece of shit. I know. Jim drank his beer, slow. What do you want? I'll pay you $6,000, half of what Tyler owes. Cash. Tonight. Jim raised an eyebrow. In exchange for? Tyler and Megan are throwing a housewarming party in 2 weeks. Big event, lots of guests, trying to show off. I want you to show up and demand the other $6,000. Loud, public, in front of everyone. Jim smiled. You want me to embarrass him? I want him to feel what it's like when people see who he really is. Jim finished his beer. Deal. I handed him an envelope. He didn't count it, just stood, shook my hand, and walked out. Mac was waiting in the truck outside. How far are you going to take this? He asked. I stared at the dark road ahead. They tried to evict me from my own life, I said. I'm going to evict them from theirs. Megan started cracking. I didn't have to watch her. Other people did it for me. Mutual friends, neighbors, people who followed her online. She called Evan 14 times in one day, called Tyler, called Kelsey, tried to control the narrative, spin the story, make me the villain. But the cracks showed. She posted a long Instagram caption about family betrayal and standing strong. Half the comments were supportive. The other half asked questions, hard questions. One comment said, Wait, isn't that necklace your dad's? Megan deleted the post an hour later. I kept digging. Called an old friend who still worked IT at the school. Asked him to pull any emails with Megan's name in the subject line. He found one. Sent 2 years ago, from Megan to Evan. Subject, Dad's schedule. Body. Keep him out for at least 2 HRs tonight. Tyler needs time. That was it. That was the proof. Megan knew. She helped plan it. She coordinated the timing. I sat in my truck, staring at the email on my phone, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. After tonight, I said out loud to no one, I'm not your father anymore, Megan. That was my heel turn. That was where I stopped being the good guy. The housewarming party was Saturday night. Megan and Tyler sent out invitations, digital and printed. Join us for a celebration of new beginnings. I wasn't invited. I went anyway. I coordinated 3 things. 1. Jim Halley would show up at 8 p.m. to demand money. 2. Gloria would bring printed copies of Megan's fake job title claims and hand them to specific guests. 3. Mac would escort me in, no matter what. I armed myself with documents. Tyler's handwritten statement. Audio of Kelsey screaming about the robbery. Screenshots of Megan's email to Evan. I wasn't going to use them all. Just enough. The trick wasn't making them hurt. The trick was making them exposed. I smiled in the mirror that morning, getting dressed. Khakis, button-down, work boots. The trick is not feeling bad, I said to my reflection. The trick is feeling clean. The party started at 7. By 7:30, the house was full. Music, lights, a champagne tower on the kitchen island, charcuterie boards everywhere. Mac and I walked in at 7:45. People noticed immediately. Conversations stopped, heads turned. Megan saw us from across the room. Her face went from shock to rage in 2 seconds. She pushed through the crowd, heels clicking, and stopped 3 feet from me. You are not welcome here, she said. Low, venomous. I smiled. I want to say hi to it. The room's attention snapped to us. Megan's hand went to her throat, touching the necklace. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. At 8 p.m. sharp, Jim Halley walked in. He didn't knock, just opened the door and walked through the crowd like Moses parting the sea. Tyler! He bellowed. Tyler was by the champagne tower. He turned, saw Jim, went pale. Jim marched up to him, waving a stack of invoices. You owe me 12 grand, Jim said. Voice loud, clear, angry. And your daddy-in-law ain't covering you anymore. So either you pay me tonight, or I'm filing a lien on this place and telling everyone here how you got it. The room went silent. Tyler stammered something. Jim cut him off. No more excuses, no more promises, cash or lien, choose. People pulled out their phones, started recording. Tyler looked at Megan. Megan looked at me. I just stood there, arms crossed. Gloria appeared at my side, moving through the crowd, handing folded papers to the gossipy women, the ones who mattered. I saw them open the papers, read, hands going to their mouths. One of them said, loud enough to carry, "She doesn't even work there?" Another, "She's been lying this whole time?" The whispers spread like fire. Megan's face crumbled. She looked around, seeing the judgment, the recording phones, the disbelief. "You're destroying your own family," she screamed at me. I stepped forward, calm, and looked her in the eye. "You destroyed it," I said, "the night you scheduled the robbery." I pulled out my phone, showed her the email, the one she sent to Evan 2 years ago. "Keep him out for at least 2 HRs tonight." She stared at the screen, went white. "That's not—" "It's time-stamped," I said. "It's archived, and everyone here can see it." I turned the phone toward the crowd. People leaned in, squinting, reading. Megan lunged for my phone. Mac stepped between us, gentle but immovable. "Don't," Mac said. Megan backed up, breathing hard, tears streaming, makeup ruined. Tyler tried to say something. Jim shut him up with a look. The party was over. People started leaving, fast, grabbing coats, mumbling apologies, avoiding eye contact with Megan and Tyler. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Mac, Gloria, Megan, and Tyler. Megan sat on the floor, back against the kitchen island, sobbing. Tyler stood by the window, staring at nothing. I walked over to Megan, knelt down beside her. "You wanted my life," I said quietly. "You wanted my home, my money, my peace. You thought I was too old, too tired, too soft to fight back." She looked up at me, eyes red. "You were wrong," I said. I stood, looked at Tyler. "The contractor's lien goes through on Monday. Your credit's done, Megan's reputation is done, and your marriage." I glanced at the empty room. "That's up to you." I walked out. Mac and Gloria followed. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. "You feel better?" Mac asked. I thought about it. "Yeah," I said. "I do." The fallout took 2 weeks. Tyler's house went into foreclosure. The SUV got repossessed. Megan's Instagram went silent, then private, then deleted. Evan called me once. I didn't answer. Kelsey sent me an email. I didn't read it. I changed my number, kept my apartment, fixed the door frame one more time, just to be sure. Gloria brought me dinner twice a week. Mac came by for coffee on Saturdays. Life got quiet. One morning I woke up, made breakfast, sat by the window, and realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt clean, like I'd taken out the trash and aired out a room that had been rotting for years. My kids made their choices. I made mine. I didn't forgive them. I didn't reach out. I didn't soften. I just moved forward. Some people call that cold. I call it survival. 3 months later, I got a letter. Legal paper, certified mail. Inside was a settlement offer. Megan and Tyler wanted to drop any potential claims if I agreed not to pursue theft charges. I laughed, signed it, sent it back. Not because I was done, because I'd already won. They lost their house, their image, their credibility. Each other probably, though I didn't care enough to check. I kept my home, my peace, my sense of who I was. That's the real revenge. Not destruction, restoration. You take back what's yours, you lock the door, you sleep through the night, and you never ever let them in again. I stood on my balcony that evening, coffee in hand, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The door behind me was locked, reinforced, secure. The life inside was mine, and nobody, not my children, not their spouses, not anyone, was ever going to take it from me again. I took a sip of coffee. It was the best thing I'd tasted in years.